Welcome to our podcast series. Today's episode, we are going to be discussing a few topics, and one of them is self-care, and we're going to talk about the importance of self-care and why it's so essential. In fact, even Elon Musk hasn't focused on self-care lately. It is a big deal because when you're overworked and you're burning the midnight oil, you want to make sure that you have sufficient sleep, sufficient time for personal stuff, as well as sufficient time for business stuff. The next topic is scheduling and planning. This is where we'll dive deep into, how you can be more organized and how you should follow a schedule, whether it's on Google Calendar, whether it's, Microsoft Calendar, Apple Calendar. It doesn't matter. If you put your stuff in a calendar, that is like your daily checklist. So we're going to be discussing the importance of scheduling and planning your journey ahead of being an entrepreneur. And then the last topic we'll be touching on this podcast is communication with the team and family. And we'll also be discussing resource partners and diversifying business interests. So thank you all for listening today. Byron, it's a pleasure to have you as always. How are you doing today?
And I'm golden. I appreciate the opportunity once again. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited, to talk about these important discussions that people should, really think about, because there's just so many things going on in our day-to-day lives, and sometimes we get drowned inside our work. And one of the weaknesses that a lot of people transitioning out of the employee mindset forget that as an entrepreneur and as a CEO, people have to work outside the business, not inside the business. Self-care is something that entrepreneurs have to make it a point to add that in their daily routine. And if they do not add it to their daily routine, there will be a time where people will start feeling burnout. And in addition to that, creating time blocks is so important because when you create time blocks for between 2 to 4 hours, that's a sufficient amount of time to work on one project and just focus on one project only. And once you're done finishing that project, you can move on with your day or focus on the next project. But the reason why time blocks, I'd say, is important is because a lot of people, when they're in automation mode, they tend to do 20 different tasks at one time. It's called multitasking. It has not been shown to be productive. And focusing on one thing for like a fixed period of time will help you be a perfectionist at what you're doing. So if you're writing a book, for example, an ebook, and you put a time block of 3 hours per day writing your ebook, and if you do that for 3 hours a day where you have no distractions, you're not browsing through social media, you're not answering any phone calls, you're just focused on writing, you're more likely to make less mistakes. And down the line, you don't have to refine your processes that much, because the first attempt was, you gave all your effort and energy in the first attempt because you were focused on that task and you did not get distracted with something else. Similarly, I think it's also important for entrepreneurs to have time blocks to also spend time with their family. It could be your wife, it could be your kids, or it could be your friends or your relatives. But making the time to do these things is so important, because when you get too drowned in your work, you can feel numb sometimes. What are your thoughts there, Byron?
I had a conversation with a wonderful person today about that. I get tunnel vision often. It happens to me. I'm very passionate about my work. I'm passionate about my family. So when I'm involved, I feel as though I have the best experience. Being involved for me means having structure. Because when I have structure, I know where I could be fully involved in what space and time. So when I'm with my family, I like to do nothing. Like I want to just be there, you know?
Yeah.
Because I found when I mix the two, which often happens still, I don't experience those moments in the capacity that I could. And when in my work, I finished up some floor and I focused on just the floor, right? I didn't focus on doing the floor and the cabinets and everything else. It was important to really understand for my own placement of how this functions in my head. I think people think multitasking is in relation to doing a task at once, doing another task at once, and doing another task at once. I don't think you can be fully involved all the time. It can happen. You can be in your flow and you can get in your space where you're doing multiple things, prepping food and, putting stuff away, whatever that is.
Or even listening to music when working, right?
Exactly. There are times where it may benefit you and you're actually in the flow of it.
Yeah.
But I like to think sometimes multitasking is a day, right?
Yeah.
The whole day is like your mind. That moment, that day is your mind. And in that day, you figure out how to structure your day so you move fluidly through those transitions based off of how you structured it. That for me provides some solace, for sure. It provides some solace. It's important because we're not just building businesses. We're building ourselves, and within that, businesses spring up. We're creating a strong foundation, and from there, opportunities arise. And it helps us understand timing. Really understand. If you research how to build your day, then you're going to research how to build your business. Because you're starting with the ground process. You're starting with the ground process about what are the values, the things that help me align and really have the highest level of productivity in my day. Then from there, you're in a clear space of thinking. You apply that to your business. What are the time, spaces, and understandings that I need to gain to know when to act and what tools am I going to use? What analytical trends am I going to be researching? Because then man, it sucks because when you're in the struggle, you feel the stress. But when you're in the winning, when you're in the green, you understand. You look back and you say, oh, that's what that was about. But in reality, when you're in it and you're in the struggle, that's what it's about. And you got to have that same energy, because it's not a problem until you make it a problem. And so we have to learn about how to create these timing methods and apply real precision and not rush things. Every time I rush things, I'm generally messing things up. In construction, I learned carpentry. I learned if you have to force it, as well as cars, if you have to force it, like you have to force the thread, force the bolt onto the thread, you're probably messing something up.
Yeah.
And that's just something that I put that everywhere in my life. And do I always apply it? Probably not, right? But that's a part of that awareness and the self-care. And I mean, I'm pretty sure you do your due diligence in terms of timing and knowing when to speak in your personal life and professional life and the opportunities that arise and all of those, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. That's the constant struggle of being an entrepreneur. It is always challenging to stay focused on one thing, right? Because we just tend to do our best in everything, and we want to be the jack of all trades. But you can't be that way for too long. It's always good to be the jack of all trades for some part of your life. But when you are, owning your own business, think about it, right? An entrepreneur creates dreams, an entrepreneur builds dreams, and an entrepreneur builds awareness. In order to build awareness, you have to give all in, right? You have to give your very best at the task at hand. And doing that with the help of creating time blocks where you're minimizing all external distractions and just focusing on this one task, it could be greatly beneficial. You might not end up doing it, and you might not end up spending all 3 hours of that task, maybe 2.5 hours, maybe 2 hours. But the fact that you put in majority of your time focusing on one thing is what makes a difference. And with constant repetition, you will be able to get in the zone a lot quicker, because a lot of us individuals are creative beings, and there are many times in our lives where we get in the flow and then we think back at that moment and realize, wow, I was so focused on that moment. How do I get to that state again, right? And getting to that state happens with creating time blocks and schedule. And time blocks should be between 2 to 4 hours, because that's when you can complete an actual project. And there were times in my life where I was not good at implementing it. When I was in DC, I was juggling 2 full-time jobs, and that did affect, my time being spent with my family. For example, every time my wife and I would travel to Europe, I would spend a lot of my time emailing on my smartphone while we were, eating dinner or eating lunch or even hanging out somewhere. And it did get to a point where I realized, wow, this is toxic. What I'm doing is toxic. When I'm spending time with my family, I should spend 100% of all my time and energy with them and put all my work aside. And it took a while for me to get there. And the journey of getting there made it more better for me, because it did get to a point where I was able to conserve my energy and apply that energy for the different aspects of my life. So, being able to, self-care and creating time blocks is very important, because at the end of the day, this is all about conserving your energy. If you're giving too much energy at one task, for example, if you spend maybe more than an hour on social media a day or 2 hours, it will affect your mind and you will feel unproductive, right? And the same goes for different tasks that you're doing. So however you shape your life, however you create the time blocks, remember the whole process is all about conserving your energy, because conserving energy is so important in business, because when you have to work on an important task, you want to give all your attention towards it. And with energy conservation, that can get you a long way. So
Yeah, and then within those time blocks, being intentional about what we're doing with them, using them to not actually build your body up. There are different medical systems that have correlated organ systems with moods. And so strengthening your body, you may enhance your mood so that you can give your all. You're enhancing your adaptability. There are adaptogens you can incorporate into your body that help you be more focused and not break down your body slowly. We all have vices, whether it's sugar, all types of sugar, whatever that is, right? And how your body reacts to that. Start building the mechanisms that help reinforce your vision, whether that's employment and you're an investor, whether that's all these things, and Mahir's right, being a jack of trades but a master of none probably doesn't provide anything as much as if you provided yourself into one space, or a specialization of spaces or an incorporation of spaces. You're that conduit or that bridge for an incorporation of different intersections. You have to define it. And in the conservation of energy, it's also the direction of it, because the energy is going to be flowing. You're not going to be able to hold it. So it's more so, how are we going to incorporate it into the spaces that are really, for us? I'm big on scheduling and planning, not because I like it, but because I recognize what it provides outside of the business aspect. Just providing structure and planning. You actually design your future on a calendar. You know, you can design like, hey, we're going to be doing these things and these things are going to be accomplished. It's probably a more better. It's probably that's terrible grammar. It's probably a better alternative than not writing out anything and just living according to someone else's will.
Yeah.
Now, well, and not even the higher spirit's will, not even God's will. I'm talking about someone in a suit, you know, someone that's telling you when you can go somewhere and when you can't go somewhere. And so taking on, like, you're writing out your life. I think that's an important thing as a business owner. It's not necessarily you're writing out a schedule when to accomplish things. You're writing out the things that matter to you. You're writing out your vacations, because as a business owner, maybe some of those are partner vacations or business trips where you have to go meet a client. You know, you're writing out this essentially, you're writing out a manuscript on how you want this thing to go, this thing called life. And then within that, you're weaving in the opportunities and understandings of being a business owner. You're weaving in the understandings and possibilities of being a family member in whatever capacity that is. You know, and I think those things allow for you to aim for a target. And that target can be your health. It can be breathing, you know, it can be stretching, yoga, qigong, you know, incorporating that, having that be a part of your lifestyle, making that a part of your entrepreneurship journey, whatever that is for you. But having the focus doesn't just start with being a business owner. It starts with what level of engagement and involvement do I want with this thing that we're talking about in terms of building a business? And then how do I incorporate my life to make sure I feel whole within that? And that becomes a piece of me and me not a piece of it, right? And then the scheduling and the planning allows for you to separate that. There's like the separation of like, I can engage with this and I can step away, because otherwise it's always in your head. Trust me.
No, absolutely 100% correct there, because what I've noticed is, you know, people aspire to be jack of all trades, right? Because they look up to other people and they're like, wow, this person can do everything. You know, he's a marathon runner. For example, let's take Dwayne Johnson, right? Dwayne Johnson is a bodybuilder. He's a celebrity. He's an entertainer. He's an actor. He even does his own rap music, and he has his own tequila brand. People aspire to be like him because he is almost like the jack of all trades. But how did he get there? He focused on one thing at a time. He gave all his effort. When he's acting, he gives all his energy and effort in acting. He doesn't get distracted. So if you want to be the jack of all trades, you can get there, but that doesn't happen with multitasking. It happens with setting dedicated time blocks and giving all your energy and effort and time with that particular task at hand. And if you do more of that on a regular basis, on a consistent basis, if you incorporate it in your routine, you know, like you mentioned, it will make all the difference. And you may not see the results overnight. It will take you maybe a few months. For bigger projects, it could take you a few years, but the results will come. It's compound interest. So.
And that comes with communication. I think my family we're formal, but informal, right? We have moments where we like to be organized, but sometimes more so on a physical plane as opposed to a mental capacity in terms of planning life out and things like that. So it's very important to always, you know, tap into both worlds and say like, all right, let's get the physical world together and structured, as well as the longevity plan. And how does that work? And what does that look like? Because those relationships are the ones that are going to affect you. Those are the people that you're going to be around as you're on this journey. And they need to know the kind of vision that you're on. And you need to know who's on the vision, who isn't on the vision. Because it's not a matter of like, are you in or you out? But sooner or later, the level of engagement and involvement between people, once you create a stand on who you're going to be and how you're going to do it, and the opportunity you want to be able to provide to the world, people are going to choose up. And so you have to figure, how do I explain my communication in a way that it's still open to everyone, but you're still on your mission? You know, you're not going to wait for anybody to help you, or you're not going to wait for anyone to be the reason why you start.
Yeah.
You know, understanding who are your resources in terms of whether that's inspiration, capital, other referrals or people, or even products. Like, where are you going to find your stuff? You know, being able to communicate with your family and share the vision and your time schedule gives them much more of a succinct plan as to how to support you.
Absolutely.
Or how not to support you.
Yeah, no, communication is very, very important, because if you think about it, right, we haven't still entered the era in technology where we can read people's minds yet, right? We're still far behind there.
Oh, that would be weird.
Yeah. So communication is key to everything, right? Like, for example, when you hire a new vendor in your business and the vendor is less responsive, you get worried and you start to, you know, question whether how reliable this vendor is. And I feel like one way to tackle that is communication, because nobody knows what you're thinking and nobody knows how you're feeling, what life events happen to you. But people will start making assumptions in their head, right? That, hey, is there a reason this person is not responding back to me on time? Does he not like me? Is this not aligned with what I'm doing? Does this person have, you know, we can't understand people's intentions unless there's some sort of a communication. And when people
we'll create a story.
We'll create a story in our head, and then we'll actually start to believe it, right? That's how human psychology works. So it's very important to have a very strong sense of communication, not just with, you know, your team members in your company, but also with your family, your relationships, especially with your relationships, because you know, the ones who are closest to you, they're at the core of every aspect of your life. So being able to convey your intentions, your vision, your, you know, what you want to do in the future. For example, I want to save up for a house. I want to buy a Tesla Roadster, for example, right? Having those goals is great, but also communicating it will actually make it more real for you, because people will hold you accountable for it, right? So for example, you tell your friends, I have a really great business idea, I'm gonna, you know, start this company. And the next time you meet them a few weeks later, they will want to know more about it. And it makes you want to hold yourself accountable, and you will actually be more invested into building that dream and making it a reality, right? So yeah, communication is key to everything, and it helps set intentions, and it helps, you know, people will also be able to connect you with the right people who can actually help be part of your journey with you, right? So
you want the people who push, not pull, you know? You want the people who push, and everyone can be helped, but in different stages. Right? You want people who pour into, and you're saying, man, weren't you telling me about your business that you just got into? Like, tell me more about it. Send me the link. And you're like, oh, damn, I got to send this person the link. They asked me for the link, you know, and that reminds me, somebody asked me for the link. I got to send them the link, because that's pouring into people. That's that's building credible resources for sure. I think that's vital. I wouldn't have known about a lot of platforms or even spaces to even look without having poured into people first, or even communicating with them a dream or a vision, and kind of letting them into my world. I was told that you're not what you have or what you've done necessarily, more so than who you are to people, who you were to people. Because the people tell the story, right?
Yeah.
So incorporating the vision to some degree, I think it'd be to your benefit in the long run, right? Because the thing is, how do we provide value and get an equitable exchange in return? How do we do that? That's like, for me, that's been the ultimate test of seesaw. You know, being able to balance those things. Because from there, I understand the different areas that I can provide value. I understand the areas that I can wear different hats, and the areas where I should not be wearing different hats. For sure, I would consider myself, like, I know how I've been exposed to do a lot of different things and have many different interests. But the things that I find more of my expertise and more of my affinity, I want to pour into those spaces. And I understand that those spaces leak into other areas where I eventually will have ventures. But that can happen when, you know, you're not focused on building the foundational income structure. You're not focused on building the foundational resource partners, the foundational scheduling and timing structures. Because once you build that, different things just trickle out. You know, the opportunities just come. You'll get an opportunity to start X company and X company in this time period where opportunity is, you know, everywhere, abundant. And that's pretty cool. You know, it just takes timing. There are things that I want to focus on. It took me a little over maybe like a half a month to build a website and build out a catalog. You know, Hetepu fully clothed, like being able to do something in that sense. But I had to just focus on that, and that's what I'm focusing on. I'm not gonna focus on necessarily everything. I'm gonna build the website. I'm gonna do all the website design. Once I build the website design, I'm gonna fill all the pages with information. Once I do that, I'm gonna build out my catalog, you know, or start placing my catalog. So it all took structure and time, and that in itself is a multitasking project in the midst of all the other projects. You know, so being able to focus on that, family, it taught me skills that, you know, I would have to go to a job to learn. But in reality, I took the time and energy and just focused on it myself, and was able to experience something that's crazy, wild, like crazy wild, because I did it for myself and by myself, you know, but not for myself, right? Because it's that larger picture stepped in and was like, this spoke to one of the efforts that I want to give to clothing.
Yeah. No, that's really awesome. And, you know, building a foundation will never happen overnight, right? It's always consistent work and effort. And this reminds me of this really cool book I read by James Clear called Atomic Habits. It's a really awesome read, very easy to read book. And he talks about how 1% increments each day can make all the difference long term. And he uses a couple examples in his book and analogies on how one of the worst bicycle teams in the world actually became the best bicycle team in the world by just improving what they're doing 1% better each day. And if we apply that to our day-to-day, if we even just make small changes to improve what we're doing each day, it will eventually add up, and the results might not happen overnight. It will take a lot of time, but having the patience to do it and not just focus on the end vision, actually enjoying the journey is the bigger part of life. Because if you think about it, most people are deluded in the sense that they're so deluded that they're only focusing on the end goal. Unfortunately, not every person in the world might reach their end goal or their dream or their vision of what they aspire to be in life. Their journey is the most important part, because the journey is 80% of what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. You're grinding, you're hustling to get to that rosy picture that you have in your head, right? So while you're focused on the long-term vision, while you are focused on building that dream, take a moment, take a deep breath, and actually enjoy what you're doing. Because if you're not enjoying what you're doing, you're not giving all your effort and energy into it. And I feel like that's what people need constant reminders of, right? I mean, even I need constant reminders that, it's all about the journey. It's not about the end picture, right? The end picture will happen eventually, but are we just going to be sad and not excited until it happens? We should be constantly happy throughout the journey of getting there. So,
or at least at peace with what's going on.
Yeah.
Not angry at what's going on. Like, life's not happening to us, it's happening for us. For sure. I appreciate the time.
Yeah, likewise. It was a pleasure, discussing this. For the next episode, we will touch more about diversifying business interests, scaling, and outsourcing. So thank you all for being here today.
Perfect. Thank you.